We are at 3 after, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started today. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm pleased to welcome you to the webinar, Efficiency and Conservation, Solutions to Overcoming Challenges, hosted by AEP Energy in collaboration with Second Nature. I'm Bridget Flynn, a Climate Programs Manager at Second Nature, and my role is to support the Climate Leadership Network to advance climate action progress. So in doing so, I work with our implementation liaisons as well as working groups and corporate partners. And previous to joining Second Nature, I was a sustainability officer at Oberlin College for 9 years. So I'm very familiar with many of the challenges our campuses face, including some of the ones that our presenters will be talking about today. If we haven't met, please note that I'm here to connect and support, and I will put my email and bio in the chat here in a moment. Before we get started, I'll run through a few housekeeping items in advance of the presentation. Shortly, I will turn it over to our presenters. They will run through their presentation and then we will hold discussion after. So you're welcome to put questions in the queue to be answered during the Q&A as well as in the chat. If you use the Q&A, it will be a little bit easier for us to manage in case the chat gets extensive. So if you see at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A feature, and we would prefer if you use that. But if you want to use the chat, that's okay. And my colleague Shayna Masajewski will be helping us out to monitor questions and make sure that we can have a fruitful discussion today. So thank you so much, Shayna, for joining us. This webinar is being recorded and later will be posted on the Second Nature webinars page, our YouTube and Solution Center. The Solution Center is also where you can find information about the framework being presented today. And with that, now I would like to introduce Brandy Nye and Brittany Strumble from AEP Energy. Brandy is a business development manager in energy services, and Brittany is a customer program management lead. Together, they have over 20 years of experience in sustainability and energy efficiency fields. And welcome, Brandy and Brittany, and please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. Before we get started, definitely want to send a big thank you to Second Nature. They've been a great partner, and we wouldn't be here today to talk about fun topics like energy efficiency, sustainability, had it not been for our partnership with Second Nature. So first and foremost, thank you, Bridget, for the introduction. We're coming to you from Chicago, and with that, we love our technology. We really do, but sometimes we have internet issues. And so if anything happens, Bridget is going to let us know and interrupt us to make sure that you're getting good quality presentation and that you're seeing the same slides that we're seeing. So really appreciate that. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Before we dive into the meat of the presentation, we just wanted to tell you a little bit more about who we are. American Electric Power has been serving customers for over 100 years. Their service territory spans over 11 states. And then you have AEP Energy. AEP Energy was actually established about 20 years ago. It serves gas and electricity to over 26 states. And finally, you have where Brittany and I reside, and that's in Energy Services. Energy Services is our energy advisory arm of AEP. We focus on energy management solutions, decarbonization strategy, and many more. So just wanted to give you a highlight of kind of who you're talking to today. We have a nice agenda for us to go over today. We're going to start very high level with sustainability, the new motivation for energy efficiency beyond just cost savings and energy reduction as it's been known for in the past. We're going to talk about some opportunities to remove carbon from your energy emission portfolio. And then we're going to focus on the meat of the presentation, which is on energy efficiency, specifically how to set up a successful framework and how to overcome challenges. We've all seen an increased spotlight on sustainability and ESG related issues. I think we're all experiencing, whether your business, university, what have you, pressure from shareholders to have a sustainability plan, to have a climate action plan. And really, it's up to us to reduce the negative impacts of our operations on climate change. There's a growing consensus around climate change as it really being a material issue, and it's creating a sense of urgency. We're hearing more stakeholders ask us, ask universities, what are you doing to mitigate the climate impacts? And an actionable plan that's actually driving results. And that actionable plan driving results is really important.
And we know that it's something that all of you guys in the audience have agreed to with Second Nature and are actively participating in. So, we thank you for taking that first step in this, and hopefully this can help you on your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sadly, what comes with climate change is the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events, the devastation that they leave in their wake. I'm originally from New Orleans, and so I've just seen and been impacted by the increased severity and frequency of hurricanes. And we know that there's fires out west, and so we're all impacted in a different way. And it's really in the spotlight now, and so we're seeing a lot more pressure.
Yeah, and with that being said, it is in the spotlight more, and younger generations are definitely starting to see and feel these impacts in a way that they're worried about their future. And so how that kind of brings us back to why we're here today is as these climate change events become more visible and closer to home, younger generations want to support businesses and industries that are making efforts to adapt and to be an active participant in sustainable solutions. This is very simply seen with just the fashion industry. I know that every time I'm going out shopping, I see some sort of, return clothes here, return jeans here, so they can be upcycled or recycled. And so, if we're gonna want to participate in these types of businesses, then we better walk the talk as well. And we're happy to help do that today. So, additionally, some other different things that are going on is technology is improving so quickly, and it's becoming more affordable as new innovations come out. Energy efficiency, I don't think any of us are strangers to this concept. It started decades ago as just by looking for a way to use less energy. And now we're improving what feels like daily. So a great example of this is just how lighting has grown over the past couple decades. So we started off with CFLs, and we have now morphed and progressed into very advanced LEDs, and even just different things like dimming sensors or occupancy sensors that you can put on in your office building. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, and technology is always improving. Additionally, there's increased policy and regulations at all levels, so governmental, and also just within organizations, and even at a local level. So municipalities are oftentimes taking a huge lead in driving sustainability at local levels. I know there's a handful of universities and neighborhoods around Chicago that have really taken a stand as trying to become carbon neutral and have been huge drivers in that effort. So as universities, you probably also see this adoption and are being asked to drive forward and set goals, whether you're in a college town or in a larger city.
Yeah, that's right. So, now that we know the mega trends and kind of what's driving a lot of our behaviors around sustainability, what are we going to do about it? We really need to scale up to meet the challenge. But how? How do we scale up and meet this challenge? Well, we're going to propose today a rigorous framework that we believe can help you where you are in either building or implementing your climate action plan. This can be used regardless if you're just looking at greenhouse gas emission reduction, or if you're focused on today's topic, which we are going to get to in more narrower focus, energy efficiency. But really what we've laid out here is a framework and a process that you can use for any of the climate action that you're trying to tackle. And what it begins with is survey. So what are your university's needs? What opportunities do you know of right off the bat that you can deploy or use that are available to you? Then an assessment. So what insights analysis can drive maybe opportunities that make economic viability sense, feasible sense, and strategic fit with your campus? Plan. Everything starts with a good plan. I'm not going to dive into the solutions and prioritizations on this slide because that's a lot of what our program's about. And then once you have your plan, what's the plan if you're not going to execute it and drive results? And so at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're set up for success and that you're managing the program that you've established, that you're meeting the objectives that you've established, and that you know how to optimize your results.
And one thing we'll keep, coming back to throughout our presentation today is just this idea of a programmatic, holistic view on how you're managing your energy. So yes, we're talking about and focusing on energy efficiency today, which is a great place to start, and we'll get into that. But just really, once you get from execution into management, it's kind of an ongoing thing. You need to be managing it on a regular basis to really get the optimal results that you're looking for.
So before we dive into the EE, again, I promise we'll get there. We wanted to just show you that there's a lot of options out there to tackle reducing your carbon emissions. And so we can span from energy efficiency, which I like to say the best emission-free kilowatt hour is the one that you don't use, all the way to changing the source of the supply to which your energy is coming from, whether that be through renewable energy or electrification, beneficial or fleet or otherwise. I know there's a lot of university buses and there's a lot of news out there of electrifying the fleets on campuses, which is really exciting to see. Anyway, all of these tools are tools in the toolbox that can be used to meet all of those stakeholder sustainability demands that we talked about a little bit earlier.
All right, so let's start to get into a little bit of why we're here today. So we're focusing on energy efficiency and energy conservation measures, or the easiest way to put it is reducing your energy usage. So EE and ECMs can be used sort of interchangeably, but address both physical upgrades or retrofits as well as behavioral changes. So a lot of times these two things that go together can address low cost, no cost options, as well as maybe identify areas where you can use some of your capital costs. So starting with those low, no cost ways is a great way to start your sustainability journey. It gives you the ability to reduce energy usage and save on energy bills. And a great thing about energy efficiency, we've mentioned already, it's been around for a while, so it is impactful and it's proven. It has been around for decades and it is a clear path to start on. The fact that we are seeing new evolvements in financing and funding options, which we'll get to, and different things, shows that this isn't something that you're going to try to do and maybe see results. You will see results. So you're not only going to save money on energy, but you're also going to save money on operations and maintenance costs throughout just that individual fiscal year, as well as years to come. So with all that being said, one of the main focuses of this presentation is to also address significant challenges. And with a very specific audience, we want to make sure that we touch on like what the challenges are that you'll be seeing and how you can kind of tailor what you see today to address some of those needs. One huge thing is overcoming internal inertia. So as universities, that can be a huge hurdle. Maybe you have various different campuses in different states and you're trying to coordinate everyone. Or maybe there's competing priorities on any given year. So one of those things is just learning how to get started and how to pick back up and overcoming that inertia. So we'll definitely go through that today. And then also just getting buy-in from stakeholders. So finance departments, getting everyone on the same page, finding capital if that's what you need, can be difficult. And then additionally, I don't think I'm going to say anything here that you don't know already, but my alma mater in particularly was started in the 1800s. So these buildings can be pretty old, which sometimes makes energy efficient retrofits and upgrades, challenging to know where you're going to get the most impact. So not only are you dealing with some old infrastructure, but we're also dealing with a lot of different types of buildings. You've got classrooms, office spaces, dorms, labs, athletic facilities, and those are all going to use energy in very different ways and at very different times. So that all together can be kind of a lot to overcome, but we feel that our presentation today is really going to be impactful in terms of where to get started. And there's always a lot going on in EE. We've seen so much change every day. We feel there's new news coming out all the time. So data analytics is constantly improving. We'll get into a little bit of how that can apply to your facility and portfolio, especially with larger portfolios a little later in the presentation. I've already discussed technology innovations a little bit. But I think one cool thing that people forget about is that you don't have to spend a ton of money on a really expensive heating and cooling system. You can maybe retrofit old equipment to get you to where you need to go, while you're maybe saving up capital funds for other bigger investments. And then we'll address some funding mechanisms later in the presentation.
And Brittany, by the way, have you changed your light bulb? Right? I mean, we're laughing about it, but it's as simple sometimes as just changing out your light bulbs and realizing those savings.
It's true. Very true. All right, so now we're going to set the stage a little bit. We've talked kind of a little bit high level, and now we want to really what is the review what the opportunity is here. So this slide shows that the U.S. has the potential to save 741,000 gigawatt hours of electricity a year. And what you're looking at here is those blue states are the equivalent of that is the equivalent of electricity of taking those blue states off the grid for an entire year. So that's a lot of opportunity. But, well, I guess, and when you look at these states, I mean, a lot of you can probably relate to where these are located. You're probably located in some of these states. So there's a lot of different opportunities that we can do to reduce this energy and actually take hold of some of these energy savings that are available and out there. And universities, I mean, spend $14 billion annually on energy. And low-hanging fruit in terms of energy efficiency upgrades is an opportunity that's out there for the taking. So hopefully we can really have an impactful presentation on where to and how to get you started.
14 billion annually, that hurts, right? That's a spend that you know you have to make, and just collectively that's a large number. And so this is definitely one way to tackle that number and get that number down. So far we've talked very high level, and now we want to shift to the program approach that we believe can unlock additional benefits of energy efficiency. Again, just to bring home the challenges, you might hear us repeat a few things, and it's really because we think they're important. Overcoming the inertia, it's real. Inertia exists. Whether we think it does or doesn't, it does. And so you really have to have a solid program in place, and the value needs to be communicated to all of your internal stakeholders before you're allowed to go through and execute. Capital budgets are in place, so how are you going to spend your dollars for competing facility projects? So you usually have a limited budget, limited amount of funds, but your campus and your buildings are not limited, and the amount of projects that you have certainly aren't limited, right? So the energy efficiency, we know, we're not talking about anything cutting edge. It's not anything new. We know that most of you have probably already been executing on energy efficiency for some time. Mm-hmm. So it's really our hope that we're going to help unlock some additional value, give you some more things to think about, what you're already doing. And if any of the challenges that we've mentioned repeatedly today resonate with your university, we're hoping that you're going to find value for our messaging today.
Yeah, and one thing I like to say, Brandy already offered a tidbit that she likes based on the kilowatt hour not used. But one thing I like to remind myself of is that energy, there's no emergencies in energy efficiency. So, you know, energy, yes, but energy efficiency in terms of getting with the program and staying with the program. So it doesn't have to be a rushed thing. It can be something that is thoughtful and that is planned. And so just hopefully us going through those steps will be beneficial to you.
Absolutely. So we've already heard about the opportunity from Brittany that lies. We've heard about your spend, $14 billion annually. It's going to stick with me. And then ultimately, what you're doing here is you're trying to reduce costs, and you want to recognize some net savings. So it's not just about cost reduction; it's about the end goal of some net savings. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and talk about how we can unlock some of those savings. Establishing a program is really going to be key to unlocking those challenges that we talked earlier about inertia, a limited capital budget or restricted capital budget, depending on what you're working with, and prioritization of your efforts. Establishing your objectives is going to be key to drive organizations into action. This is where you're really going to gain buy-in from stakeholders. You're going to gain internal alignment. And this, I cannot express enough how key the establishing objectives is up front before you get into any kind of execution program. Step 2 is really developing a consistent framework that can be applied to every location you have, regardless of it's a dorm, an athletic facility, an auditorium, any of the ones that Brittany mentioned earlier. The key here is to set your criteria in a manner that's applicable to all of your facilities, regardless of the differences that they may have in their energy usage profile. Delegating authority, this is also another key step in a program. You're giving ownership to key stakeholders. If you've ever had a culture survey that's done, experts will come in, they'll do a survey for you for all of your employees, they'll give you a framework, they'll give you insights and your results. But what do you do with those results and those insights? It's been up to your organization, your university, to figure out how to apply it.
And
this is no different.
right. And one thing that's so important to that, Brandy already said, but getting the buy-in is going to make this stuff way easier. Once you're delegating something, if you've already gotten that buy-in and maybe take the time to do that thoroughly, this stuff will be much easier for you.
Right. And it's all about authority and ownership. And once someone has that ownership, they're going to deliver. And you're doing all of this up front. So it's really a great point to kind of drive home. And so finally, what would work without transparency, measurements, and authority? And so reporting and evaluation is going to be key. We talked about sustainability and the stakeholder drivers that are bringing us to have this conversation holistically about carbon reduction from our facilities and energy efficiency even more narrow. But reporting and evaluation and showing people that we've taken actions and here are the results are going to help. Our students are wanting to know that they're picking colleges based on sustainability, what they're doing in the field. And although energy efficiency might not meet the headlines, it is absolutely meeting your objectives. And so our hope is that this framework can help you with implementing strategies for your climate action plan.
All right, so as Brandy discussed, we went through the program framework at a higher level, and now we need to understand and discuss our program execution and what that looks like. I'm not going to spend too much time on these steps individually because the rest of our presentation will go through them in more depth. But to point out a couple of different things here, a lot of groups, when they say, let's look at our energy efficiency, let's figure out what we're doing, they'll bring in an auditor, they'll bring in a contractor to review a certain building or maybe a handful of buildings. And that's great. And there is a point in time for that where that's extremely beneficial. But taking a higher level approach is really the best for optimization. So we're going to review what that looks like. We're going to take you through benchmarking your data. And the best thing about this is that there's not a lot of upfront cost to get started. You have your energy bills, you have your energy usage, you have how much you spend on it, and you can work with your utility to get anything else that you might need. That being said, I don't think a lot of people realize the power that they have from those bills, and Brandy will get into that a little bit more. So just benchmarking, which now takes us into step 2 and 3, which is a high level analysis of your sector portfolio, and then into step 3, which is really more facility analytics and modeling, which I'll go over later. And then the 4th step is really about implementation. So selecting those projects that step 1, 2, and 3 have identified as being the most optimal, and implementing on it. So we'll walk through a handful of those. And, our recommendation and what we've seen be successful is to start at this high level, narrow down the scope to where projects can have the largest impact. Universities oftentimes are running with competing priorities, limited funds. So why not take a high level approach and narrow it down to where you're really going to see impact and see easy wins. And I think one important thing that me and Brandy always say is that this framework can meet you wherever you are, and it's never ending, right? So if you're somewhere on your energy efficiency journey where you're really just trying to understand, this can be tailored to you. If you're maybe somewhere in the middle and it's been stagnated a little bit, this can help you reinvigorate that process. So we'll go into all that detail a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think you see here, it's a very heavy data analytic approach that we're going to go through, but it's not that it's hard data to access.
Mm-hmm.
And so that goes into what Brittany was stating about your utility bills. There's a place for facility data. There's a place for these audits for individual facilities that you have in your portfolio of buildings on your campus. But you have utility bills. And while they're complex and have various different tariffs and line items, they are really useful, especially when you're looking at how much you're spending, how much you're using, and how much opportunity you have to reduce. And so you might have multiple facilities. You might have facilities in different states. It depends, I guess, on your profile for your campus. But there's definitely people out there that understand utility rates, how they vary, what tariffs might be available, what incentives might be available for some of these programs. And really understanding your bill and what your utility has available is going to be really important. So regardless, this is a great place to start is with your utility bill, just understanding your costs. It's as easy as that.
And as simple as that, you have access to it and it doesn't take a lot of upfront capital to just get going.
That's right. And I think the challenge here is, okay, I have 40 different buildings, and I know it's more than 40 for most of you, but I have 40 buildings, 40 different meters, and 40 different utility bills. So how can I get a portfolio level to really see where I'm spending my usage? And so we'll get into that in a little bit as well. You want to start, as Brittany stated earlier, at the sector. So benchmark. How am I doing? What are other universities doing in the energy efficiency space? What are they doing in the decarbonization, energy sustainability space? How do we stack up? How does my university stack up compared to others? Are there learnings that I can have that are quick for me to implement? Best practices are always great. But once you have your sector analysis and you get those insights, you need to bring it back down to your portfolio. And so you really want to look at your portfolio of buildings to see if there's a difference. And so do you have one or two buildings that are kind of outliers, that are just underperforming? And for some reason, you don't know why, but one auditorium is using a lot more energy than the other. And so where are those opportunities? Where are those outliers? And where can we dig deeper? And that's when you get into the facility analytics, where you might have pinpointed your outliers in buildings and energy usage that are really high, or maybe they're spiking at certain hours or certain times of the year. Get into that facility and really understand. That's where that audit comes into play a little bit more. But you definitely want to take this approach from very high level to narrowing it down to your specific facilities.
And now I have the luck of presenting some of this data that Brandy has been alluding to, where there's a lot of numbers on this slide, and you don't need to focus on those. But the point being that when we take a look at facility analytics, so Brandy did a great job of kind of describing like how we're getting down to this point in time, and this is why, you know, maybe bringing in like a more and having an audit at this point in time makes more sense, because you've already identified that facility through facility analytics is an outlier. So what you're seeing here is a handful of different charts that are going to point out, if you know, they're advanced facility analytics that can show outliers of facilities. So on the top chart, you're seeing a lot of red. What is site 1 doing that's different than site 2, 3, or 4 at certain hours of the day? So just understanding how buildings compare to each other. And one thing I'll say is you see site 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once you take a look at your portfolio and maybe you're identifying those classroom buildings, those are site 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now you're able to look at them and really level set and compare like to like. Whereas maybe before you're taking building information and you don't know what it means for the rest of your portfolio. So just really understanding at a site level so that you can continue to narrow it down and spend those very precious funds in the best way possible, and then also meet, in the best way to meet your sustainability goals. When I look at this slide, I like to think what sites are using more energy than others at the same time. I mean, it's as simple as that. And so that really empowers you to make good decisions on the next step, which once you have these outlier sites, let's say, then it's really time to take another deeper dive in facility analytics by modeling that site. So again, another fun slide with lots of numbers and colors. But what's important here is that once you identify a site that maybe is an outlier, it's that red row and it's not performing as planned, you're able to now look at the equipment that's in there. How is this building actually running? And so what are the energy bills? You can start to ask these questions. So when you're looking at this chart, you can see that the top, and I'm not going to get into too much detail, but the top chart lists out the various pieces of equipment that are running in that building at any given time. And then the bottom chart shows if you were to implement a certain energy conservation measure, what that modeling could do for potential energy savings. So on the top chart, it's saying that these pieces of equipment or chillers are running 80% of the time. And that may have been status quo for a while. But what happens if you implement an energy conservation measure like pre-cooling equipment, and now you're able to see a potential of 15% reduction in energy costs at that specific facility? So it really takes into place where you're able to a la carte pick and choose energy conservation measures to really help that specific building perform in the best way possible. And then you can implement this across your facilities that are like, that are similar. And then you're able to implement this across the portfolios as well.
And, it doesn't have to be as complex as, a chiller or free cooling. It could be as easy as I have one building that has a facade of windows and I have another one that does not. And the sun is beating through in certain hours and it's causing me to have to use my air conditioner a lot more. And so there's simple things that you can get insights from when you look at both the facility and the portfolio data that seems like it might have been common sense, but you never knew exactly how it was impacting your usage. And what you can do with the data is really see that and say, this is how much these windows are costing me.
Yeah. You can definitely put a dollar amount to something like that. And then additionally, for the people that are maybe facility managers, sustainability managers, operations managers, this is data that you can take to those stakeholders and say, hey, I saw that this one thing has this potential, and maybe there's a handful of other examples that you have. And once you get started with one facility, it'll just get that much easier to get the ball rolling with your entire portfolio. So now moving into step 4, so implementation and execution. So, this is just an example of a customer who, by doing a handful of these different energy conservation or energy efficiency measures, saved $230,000 on their energy bill through some no cost and some finance projects. And you can use those funds maybe for another effort that the university has, or maybe that's how you continue to fund your sustainability programs. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but these are all things that were just from a first base look at your portfolio, what you're able to save. And so then it just continues to go on from there. So getting through each of the steps in the process really helps identify the new cost measures that can be addressed as low-hanging fruit, and those are things we've all heard about energy efficiency. But really understanding them at a holistic level is the best approach. And then you can kind of start to decide, where am I best to use these capital expenditures? Where are they going to have the most impact? As Brandy said, there's a lot of different examples. There's a lot of different things you can do. But really, where is that money going to give you the best bang for your buck?
Yeah, bang for your buck. And I love this slide only because I love seeing the savings compared to the capital cost. So, to me, it's a no-brainer. But you do have some competing priorities. Is the energy efficiency savings that you drive at your university going to get a headline? Probably not. It might be the renewable energy rooftop solar project or hydrogen, investments that you might make. And so it's not always going to be the headline driving solution, but it's the most impactful. It's a negative cost measure, so you're going to get savings. It's just a no-brainer, really, to do energy efficiency. And as Brittany stated earlier, we've been doing this for many years. So we know that it's effective. We know how to do it. We know where to do it. And now we know how it impacts our data, especially when ESG reporting is, it's here. And people want to see our reporting. They want to see our emissions. And so I think energy efficiency and conservation is a really great way for us to show not only are we saving reducing our usage and reducing our carbon emissions, but we're saving money in the process. So we're not spending extra to get there.
And one thing I'll add is that we were talking earlier, and it's a quick win. So if you're struggling to get that buy-in, if you're struggling to delegate authority, if you're seeing, people want to see results, this is a quick win to eventually get you to that solar rooftop or green roof or something like that, where it is a little bit of a flashier thing. So a quick win is always a good win.
Right. And it goes back to, have you changed your light bulb yet? It's an easy implementation as well, for the most part.
All right, so let's address some funding mechanisms, because obviously that is probably one of the larger challenges that a lot of people have just kind of getting started. So these are a handful of different options you have to help you get started on your journey. And these are obviously all besides just a traditional loan that you're able to, go ahead and procure if that's the path that you'd like to take. Outside of that, you've got things like energy savings agreements, which are payments based on your avoided kilowatt hours used. There's things like technology subscriptions that function, I think we're all pretty familiar about subscriptions at this point, but where this can help is it's a flat rate with a vendor where you're able to maybe do different performance metrics and different monitoring capabilities. And then there's also a couple different things. These last two kind of function similarly, where you've got property assessed clean energy bonds. This is where a property owner is going to finance the upfront cost of energy improvements on a property, and then the payback costs over time through voluntary assessments. And then similarly, you've got on-bill financing, which allows the utility to incur the cost of clean energy upgrades, and then it's repaid back on your utility bill as a line item. These last two options are great if lower upfront cost is a challenge that you're dealing with. But regardless, and to kind of wrap up the funding mechanisms portion of the presentation, if you have questions, we're happy to help, explain any of these a little bit more, but also there's different ways you could fund this out there.
That's right. The innovation here is it's fantastic. Innovation on financing solutions has come a long way. It used to be just for Netflix, and now we're seeing it for energy efficiency, and we're seeing it for renewable energy as well. But I think the key message here is energy efficiency works, and finance institutions now know that you're going to see savings if you make the right investments, and you can prove to them that you've done your due diligence on your data up front. Mm-hmm. And so they're now taking on some risk and saying, we'll finance you because we want to have your shared savings, or we'll get paid back based on your savings, and we're going to share in that risk. And I think that is a big statement for finance institutions to say, we believe in this. So you should go and pursue this.
Absolutely. Makes it a little easier to get started.
It does. It all makes it easier. We all need a little bit of an easy button at times, and why not have it for some of our, carbon emission reduction strategies? So what have we accomplished at the end of the day? We talked about a lot here, and hopefully we've provided you with some value, some things that maybe can help you. As we stated, we know this isn't anything new. It's not earth-shattering, but it really is simple, and it's easy. You have access to the data. You know your facilities better than anyone else. You can meet your carbon reduction goals. You can decrease your usage, and ultimately you can save money. The program and execution plan that we laid out for you, it's going to help you overcome some of those challenges that we've talked about. You're going to overcome inertia. You're going to get started on your journey towards
find funding.
Exactly. You're going to prioritize your investments, and you're going to really unlock value for all of your stakeholders, which is really great and incredible. And then you have flexibility, you've minimized risk, and you've used a data approach that justifies your decisions and your prioritizations. And then you're going to be able to report easily based on your program on how successful you've been. And if you haven't been successful, you'll have key indicators that'll tell you where your gaps are. And that's important because you always want to make sure that you're looking at energy efficiency as ongoing. You're not going to do energy efficiency one year and not need it again. It's ongoing needs for all of your facilities. And finally, you're one step closer in meeting your climate action plan objectives. And again, we really hope that you enjoyed the presentation. Brittany and I have certainly had fun prepping for this. Second Nature, again, has been really great, and we value our partnership. And we're going to send it back to Bridget and open it up for any questions that anyone has.
So I think Bridget is actually having some Wi-Fi tech problems right now. So I'm going to step in and take care of this. Hey, everybody. I'm Shayna. Bridget introduced me at the beginning. I'm the data manager at Second Nature. And so I work a lot with Bridget just on like the tech side and database and data management and analytics side of things. Okay, so right now we have a couple questions coming in. The first one is, does this level of analysis require building level metering? How would we approach this analysis if we do not have metering at the building level?
I think that's a really good question. And sometimes I think it will. And I think it depends on your objectives that you lay out. But the good news is you don't have to start with that building metered data. We have a lot of analytical tools that can tell us based on, if you hire an advisor or if you have someone in the energy space, even your utility might be able to help. there's insights that we can derive just based on your usage to probably give you an indication. So you don't necessarily have to have the building meter data. Does it help? Yes, data is power. The more you have, I think the better off you are. But I don't think it's a requirement to get those high level insights, which again is why we suggest start at the sector, go to the portfolio, go to the facility.
Yeah. One thing I can add there is just a very real world example. You know, in projects that I work on, if there's not hourly interval data, you know, at least you're getting your monthly usage. There might be daily usage available to you. There might just be monthly usage available. So one thing to elaborate on why sector analysis is so important, a lot of times if all you have is that monthly usage, you can compare, and there's different databases out there. You know, the databases are great. A lot of times only as great as the data that's going into them. However, that's, you know, they're out there. And so you can kind of see in general, like if you have a monthly usage, in general, it could be 20% of that usage is going to your HVAC systems. 30% of it is being spent on lighting. There are breakdowns like that they have, that, you know, energy.gov and different places like that, Energy Star have available, so that at least you can get started on that analysis based on your building type.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple more coming in. So just to double check, are you planning to send out the slides after or the recording of the webinar?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. No, you're good. Yeah, just a recording or the slides afterwards.
Yeah, so it is being recorded, and we have provided the slides to Bridget. So we will definitely make sure you have it. We also have our emails here. We're happy for any question that you have. If we don't get to it today, please email us. We are here to help and answer questions. We actually enjoy to do that. I don't know what that says about us, but, so please feel free to reach out to us directly or directly to Second Nature, and they will get it to us. But we will provide the presentation as well as the recording. I believe Bridget will provide that to everyone.
Thank you. All right, and the next one, are there rebates for energy efficiency improvements from AEP? Is there a catalog?
Is there a catalog? I know specifically we have rebates for utilities. Have a lot of different types of programs. Commercially, even for higher ed and even places like Energy Star at a federal level, there are things like that where you're able to take advantage of incentives throughout the utilities. But we can definitely get back to you on specific utilities for AEP. And then others, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to email us and we'll follow back up with like specific catalog or incentive information for you.
Absolutely. And if you go to the American Electric Power website and you dive in, utility websites are not always the most friendly, but there's a lot of information on there. And so what we can do is specifically link to the rebates. There's different operating companies. So what that means is there's different AEP utilities throughout the 11 states that we serve. And so they're each going to have a little bit different of what the rebate looks like. So that's why it's a little bit difficult to answer directly what those rebates are right now, because they vary from utility to utility. And that goes true for any regulated utilities that you might have your university in.
But I think a good part of that answer is they're out there.
They're out.
Like I've personally worked around them. Randy's personally worked around them in different areas. So it's not specifically applicable to the state or location that you're in, but they're out there and we're happy to point you in the right direction.
That's right. And I think there's a big focus on the need for energy efficiency and conservation from regulators that are asking their utilities to invest in this to help their customers. And so I think the realization is known from both the utility provider level as well as the people that are regulating them. And so we, as Energy Services, just a sub-part of the American Electric Power, we can actually get some insights and do kind of a holistic landscape assessment of what's out there if needed as well.
Great, thank you. So people should reach out to you specifically if they have more questions about the rebates, it seems like.
For any question that you have for anything that we've covered, even if it's holistically decarbonization and how energy efficiency plays a role, we're happy to talk about anything. That's why we wanted to make sure you had our email addresses and had our contact information.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Can you talk about how this approach can contribute to net zero goals? And do you have any guidance in pursuing net zero?
Yes. Can I end there? Yes, sure. Yeah, so I think I said earlier, the carbon-free, the best kilowatt hour is the one not used. So when you talk about sustainability, you talk about the best purchase is the one that you didn't make. And it really is true. And so energy efficiency is reducing your carbon footprint because you're no longer using that power that might have been generated from a carbon intensive supply generation. And so net zero can be very complicated. And so we're hearing all of the pressure from our stakeholders. We know that we have to reduce global warming from 1.5 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial temperatures. And so how do we do that? Renewable energy, when you think about, that's the first thing that people usually hear when they talk about net zero is, well, I need renewable energy. Well, renewable energy comes with higher costs than energy efficiency. It comes with intermittency, and it might be unavailable depending on if you are in an area where the sun doesn't really shine or the wind doesn't blow. And so you really need to be very thoughtful about the investments you're making. When you're looking for a net zero strategy, you have to do the same program approach that we talked about in the very beginning. You want to have a program approach. You want to know, number one, what is your carbon inventory, right? If you don't know your greenhouse gas emissions for your university, then how can you set a net zero emissions target for 2050 if you don't know what you're up against? So first and foremost, know what you're up against and get your carbon inventory. Then you're going to have scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 is your direct electricity, your direct emissions. Scope 2 is your purchased electricity. That's probably where we're, inclined to help a little bit more and give some insights. And then you have your scope 3, which can be downstream and upstream and can be a little bit more challenging to kind of figure out, how do I get my emissions for scope 3, and then what do I do about it? Everyone's scope 3 is just their scope 1 and scope 2 of their suppliers, right? And so there's a lot to think about when it comes to net zero. So it's a little bit of a hard question to answer very briefly, but essentially you're lowering your usage. You don't have to record the carbon emissions of a kilowatt hour that you're not using.
And I think one thing I'll add there, is that it's all together, right? Like me and Brandy have both been lucky enough to study this and been working in it, but under this umbrella of sustainability and decarbonization is a lot of different things, especially when you start talking about ESG and that becoming, more at the forefront of everyone's mind. But getting started, that's why energy efficiency is oftentimes a great place to get started, because maybe while you're putting in infrastructure to measure your scope 1, 2, and 3, that can take time. Like Brandy said, it can be complicated. So why not get started with something that's a little easier to implement, get those quick wins, prove out the concept, and then get going on reporting all of your greenhouse gas emissions, get the inventory down, and then you've got a plan, you've got a roadmap, which is a whole nother service that we work on as well.
That's right. It can become really overwhelming to think about, I have to reduce my emissions to net zero, and then what happens when I get to net zero? I have to go beyond, right? It's not going to stop there, or if maybe it will stop there, but should it stop there? And we have to ask ourselves these questions. So it can be a daunting task when you look at how are you going to reduce all of your emissions, even if you have a baseline and an inventory to make progress on. And so to Brittany's point, start with something that we've been doing since the 70s, for years, and start with something that we know has been proven to work.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're down to our last couple of questions. So, can you briefly share how the load shifting and power factor correction aspects impact a building's energy efficiency?
Sure. I think we are going to phone a friend for this one on our load. If you give it a second.
Okay. Phone a friend.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
Yeah, that would be great, right? Load shifting helps save on demand charges, which basically means if you're going to look at your building and you might need to shift when you're charging something at night, or start charging it when maybe power costs a little bit less. So you can start looking at how you're physically using the energy and when you're using it. And a lot of these different types of things can lead into programs like demand response programs, where you're working with a utility to manage the energy that's available on the grid. So utilities have the responsibility to manage and make sure energy is available. And it's a partnership with everyone they provide energy to, especially in the commercial world, to make sure that that is managed and is ready when people are ready. So there's a lot of peak timing, peak load shifting that people can do. And that is really where that comes into effect. And why it can also sometimes be no cost is you can manage that as an operations manager. So you can take a look at specifically how your equipment is running at any different time in the day, work with your advisors, your utility liaisons to figure out when it would be best to maybe shift that load to running at a different time in the day so that you're spending less money and saving more money that way. And then in terms of power factor charges, those are penalties that you'll incur for not having optimized equipment or building processes. So that kind of goes hand in hand, but we will thank our dear friend in the background for helping us on a little bit of a technical question. But if that was not sufficient enough of an answer, please feel free to email me directly, and I'll make sure that we get you any specific information on that.
It just one tag along there. You might have a facility that has some really heavy load equipment. And let's say you have, 8 air conditions that are turning on at the same time. Probably not air conditions the right choice, and you're spiking your demand up all at once because they're turning on at the same minute, at the same hour of the same day. Well, tweaks to just when you start these types of equipment and when they power on, and making sure maybe they don't all power on at the same time might be an easy way to shift kind of when you're making these spikes and requiring demand from the electricity.
Yeah, it's easy to think about, residentially. Pre-pandemic, I suppose. What's happening in your house at 7 a.m.? You're getting kids ready for school, you're cooking breakfast, you're blow drying your hair, you're taking a shower, the water's got to be warm. All of that is happening at the exact same time. So if you think about it in a corporate infrastructure, university infrastructure, there's going to be places where that load is really high at any given point in the day. And maybe there's ways that you can, I don't know about cooking or hair drying, if you can shift that around in your day, but that's to put it in like a more realistic terms, like when people just think about their everyday use, that's kind of what buildings and universities, your portfolio level, you can do as well. Maybe shift around where you're going to use that energy.
That's right. And your utility has to be able to serve the demand at all times. And so they need to make sure that at peak demands, they have to be able to serve you, right? And so they have to know what those demands are. And if there's a high spike and they have to make maybe upgrades to their infrastructure to meet the demand from a capacity perspective, there's incentives that the utility wants to provide if you help them manage that demand time, that peak time.
And that's another thing. Somebody asked about utility incentives. There are other programs besides just incentives for upgrading your equipment. So I mentioned the demand response earlier. There's a lot of different things that you can get into, and this gets a little bit outside of the focus of energy efficiency on some of the points Brandy mentioned earlier, electrification and that slide. That you can use as tools in your toolkit for your sustainability strategies. So, again, happy to answer questions on those, but there is a lot that the utilities can do in partnership with you to manage your energy.
Awesome. Thank you. I know we're sort of bumping up at 3, but we do have one more question. So if anybody has to head out, please feel free to head out. But our last question is, can you talk about efficiency gains from switching a boiler from natural gas to electric? It sounds like this person had like talked to some engineers and they said that there is a decrease in efficiency and it's less reliable.
We are going to also be phoning a friend a little bit
Okay.
for that one. I know that because that is switching to electrification a bit. So we might have to take that one. We can give more details, but
Yeah, I can definitely speak to the carbon emission side of
Right,
it. But,
right. yeah.
but as far as the efficiencies, let's see if our dear friend who is a bit more on the engineering side and operational side can give us a little bit of insight.
And honestly, this
share.
might apply. This is a great question. This might apply to a lot of the folks on the phone because universities oftentimes like that is what their heating systems are. And so you're just wasting a lot of heat loss. And so that can in turn be not as efficient. And I don't know if that's answering all parts of your question, but it sounds like your engineer recommended this path forward. So we can definitely provide some more insights into that.
And if you can send us that question directly, we'll get a robust answer for you and be able to send it back.
Okay, great. So it looks like that is all of our questions. Thank you so much, attendees, for joining us for this. And thank you so much, AEP Energy and Brandy and Brittany for taking time out of your day to do this. Bridget, I don't know if you can if you want to pop in and say anything, if you can. If not, okay, great, there you are.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone. And to answer the question, I typed in the Q&A, but this recording will be available afterwards. Give us a couple days to just kind of make any edits and cut off the beginning part when we were waiting for everyone to join. And then it will go up on our webinars page, on the Solutions Center, and on the YouTube. We will probably send out an email that also has a link to the recording. So we promise we will get it to you if you want to share with any of your colleagues. And I think with that, unless there's any final questions, we'll stay on for just a couple more minutes. But yeah, thank you everyone so much for joining. Thank you for our presenters, and thank you so much, Shayna, for your technical and facilitation support while my internet went out today. So thank you everyone, and I hope you have a great day.